fund these luxury purchases amazes me.
We saved up and had fish and chips once a week. So a lot of kids did.
Friday night.
The Building Pools Amendment Bill has passed its second reading. Plunkett says what's needed are fences with a secure gate. So this argument again, or this debate again, the pool should be completely isolated from the house, ideally needing four-sided fencing, secure and self-latching gates. There is no doubt the safer you make pool fences, the fewer children will drown. Is that enough of a reason to have, all the self-latching gates and the vertical slits and make people have fences in between, tiny spaces between houses and pools, all that kind of fastidiousness that has been criticised?
Yes.
Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between what Plunkett says and what may be passed in Parliament?
Well, I think that a child's life, how do you value that? And whose convenience and whose inconvenience do you balance up against that? The problem with pools around houses is they are attractive to kids, yep. And they are places where those that supervise them might become complacent and distracted, particularly if you go to somebody else's house. I know I've heard lots of times people say, well, you don't have to fence the creeks and the streams and the other bits and pieces that run through cities and towns, but kids are not with their parents sitting around a barbecue table or something having a convivial libation in the afternoon when the kid sort of quietly wanders off to the local creek. It's the attractiveness of pools and houses, and I think that there are a lot of attractive pool fencing options which you can have these days, and with gardens and plants and what have you around them, and I don't think it's such an onerous burden.
There was obviously a reaction against all that, though, wasn't there? That's the thing. Chris, what's your view?
By whom? Who reacted against it?
Pool owners, I think, or people planning pools, or people bridling at what they saw was the, fastidiousness is what they described it at.
The nanny state type
I suppose.
Approach.
But you agree with Jonathan?
Well, I remember the case in Auckland a number of years ago now. I think it was in the late 1990s, where the argument became between a toddler who did drown in a pool and whether the owner of the property or the people renting the property were the ones who were responsible. And the case ended up being thrown out just purely on a technicality. But what you had at the time is a property that didn't meet the regs at the time for fencing of the pool, and the kid was dead.
And it's very hard to argue against any kind of individual case like that, isn't it?
Well, I thought so at the time.
Jim Flynn's new book, Professor Jim Flynn, Does Your Family Make You Smarter? Just thought I'd throw this at you before we go. The essential conclusion, just relying on the newspaper reportage, is that clever children will be pulled back by their families. Children below median intelligence will have their IQs raised in a family. And one conclusion is that by changing our environments, we can significantly upgrade our cognitive skills far more than we think.
Is that a very wordy way of saying the way you bring up your kids can influence how clever they are going to be?
Yep.
No.
I suppose so.
Well,
no, it's just the nature of a family.
We're back to parents again.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Well, it seems to be a product of actually being in a family. Have you ever significantly upgraded your cognitive skills by getting tired of the other blokes talking about girls and rugby and making a decision to start reading Goethe?
I've never read Goethe, so I guess I'm an intellectual failure.
You haven't ever done a version of that?
Well, absented yourself from a particular conversation and gone to do something more intellectual. I can't say I remember doing anything particularly like that. But
I think that's one of the examples that Professor Flynn uses in his book.
It's a pretty stark example, though, isn't it?
Having met people who sort of pulled themselves up by their intellectual bootstraps.
But it's what you choose to do, isn't it? It's what you choose to encourage your children to do. I mean, our kids have got into playing canasta and 500 and other card games, and the number of times they've wanted us to sit down and we're tired and we want to do something else. They want to have a game of cards, and I think it's quite a good idea. I mean, that sort of thing is it's different than getting them in front of the TV or other stuff. Get them thinking.
Exactly, Mr. Krebs. Mr. Weekhider, thank you so much for coming on today.
You're most welcome. Good to be here.
And Jonathan, nice to see you as well.
And you as always. Nice to talk to you, Chris.
Kia ora everyone, I'm John Campbell, and on behalf of the team, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tau te maira, e hoa mā, he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiu. And tonight, Pike River and the decision to not prosecute Peter Whittle. The appeal court is told it was unprincipled and unprecedented. And where is the former CEO of Pike River, and what does he say about this appeal? The government considers boosting police numbers. We go to Quetta, Pakistan, to talk about the suicide bombing and what on earth the people behind it are hoping to achieve. Alcohol interlocks become compulsory for repeat drink drive offenders. 300 homes still without power in Hawke's Bay, and on the Taupo Plains we talk to Lions company UNISON. And the women's 7 team wins an Olympic silver. We will hear from them. All of that and more in the next 89 minutes. But first, Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The Prime Minister says the government is considering boosting police numbers to keep up with the growing population. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says a pre-election bottom line for his party would be a significant increase in police numbers, equalling between 1,000 and 2,000 over the next 5 years. Mr Peters says New Zealand is lagging behind Australia in the number of police per capita and should at the least catch up with that country. John Key says the government is considering some kind of increase.
We're not ruling out that there'll be more police, but it won't be because Winston Peters wants them. It's because it's appropriate as our population grows. There'll likely be an increase in the number of constabulary forces that we have.
The Prime Minister, John Key. A High Court murder trial has heard the police carried out extensive surveillance on the man accused of killing a road worker and on his family during their investigation. Quinton Winders is on trial charged with murdering George Taiaroa near Atiamuri in March 2013. A police detective has told the High Court in Rotorua that numerous production orders were made for phone records of Mr Winders and members of his family, along with requests for bank, insurance, education and business information. Detective Stephen Lockett says he knew listening devices were placed in vehicles owned by the Winders family and in their homes and on their telephones, but he says he had no knowledge of friends' phones being bugged. The government now says it was aware in May of a possible trade dispute with China, and the two governments discussed trade competition at that time. But the Minister, Todd McClay, insists the law prevents him from saying exactly what the dispute is about. Last month it emerged the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade had been investigating claims industry players in China had warned the kiwifruit exporter Zespri of possible trade retaliation if New Zealand investigated claims of steel dumping. Initially, Mr McClay described media reports as extremely hypothetical. Today he says the two governments were discussing concerns in May.
There was contact between the New Zealand government and the Chinese government in late May. I can't go into the detail of exactly what that is. Again, that's as a result of legislation around any pretending or potential competition issue.
The Trade Minister, Todd McClay. The Court of Appeal has been told that the decision not to proceed with health and safety charges over the Pike River mine disaster was unprecedented and unprincipled. Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse are taking a judicial review after the High Court turned down their application to review WorkSafe's decision to drop charges against the mine's chief executive Peter Whittle. Catherine Hutton reports.
The pair want the decision not to proceed declared to be wrong, and the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment made to reconsider it. Nigel Hampton QC said the $3.4 million payment was made without the involvement of any of the families and was designed to buy off a prosecution. WorkSafe's lawyer Joanna Holden said it would have been too difficult to reach consensus with the families, and it was feared details about any offer would get out. The judges reserved their decision. This is Catherine Hutton.
The Auckland Council says all its investments comply with its responsible investment policy, even though it's still trying to find out exactly which companies it has investments in. Councillors have been told one of the funds could have $770,000 invested in British American tobacco. A review of all 11 investment funds has been carried out after an investigation by RNZ News found that funds also held shares in alcohol and sugary drink companies. The Treasurer, John Bishop, says all the council investments are legal and were made in accordance with its responsible investment policy.
What is clear is we do comply with our responsible investment policy. And in reality, when it comes down to people's view on what investment is ethical and moral, everyone's got a different view.
Council Treasurer John Bishop. In sports, New Zealand women's 7-star Portia Woodman says a couple of crucial mistakes made the difference between Olympic gold and silver today. The team had to settle for silver, beaten 24-17 by Australia in the final in Rio. When New Zealand's Woodman was given a yellow card shortly before half-time, Australia pounced with a try on the stroke of half-time. Woodman says they knew it was going to be a tough game.
A few mistakes that Australia definitely capitalised on, and we knew that they're a good rugby nation, and we knew that we were going to bring it to us every time.
Portia Woodman. The New Zealand men's sevens team begin their Rio campaign tomorrow morning. Sir Mark Todd says the New Zealand equestrian team will be going for Olympic gold when they compete in the show jumping on the final day of the 3-day event tomorrow. The team is sitting second behind Australia after 3 strong runs in the cross-country made up for a disappointing dressage round. Sir Mark, who's also a chance at an individual medal, says the team's eyeing the top podium.
At the moment, the horses all look really good. We hope they come out and they trot up fine tomorrow. They should do. They're all normally very good jumpers, so, I'll touch wood. We came out fighting after dressage. We're in a good position now, and we're going to continue to fight to try and get to the top.
Sir Mark Todd. A murder trial has heard that listening devices were placed in vehicles owned by the defendant's family and in their homes and on their telephones. Oh, I'm sorry about that. The Tasman Marcos have parted ways with former All Black wing Zach Guilford before the National Provincial Rugby competition has even kicked off. He was a notable admission from the Tasman squad, which was announced today. Guilford quit the New South Wales Waratahs Super Rugby side for well-being reasons in June. That's the news.
Weather warnings.
It's a bit of a winter wonderland and it looks fantastic, and the kids that can't get to school are out there playing, but gee, what we're saying is look, please just stay well away from poles and lines.
Refusing to give up.
I just told myself I could keep going and just stick it out. I could see the helicopters flying by, so I was just hoping that one of them would spot me.
Gold in Rio.
The next 3 of us had to perform, but we did, and we're sitting in a nice position at the moment.
Staying ahead. Guy and Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, Morning Reports, weekdays from 6. Then, after 9, news as it happens, in-depth conversations with world-leading experts, and the latest trends you need to know about. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon, straight after Morning Report on Radio New Zealand National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Great Barrier Island. Occasional rain or showers, sometimes heavy with possible thunderstorms, hail and localised downpours in the east. Auckland and Coromandel, showers turning to rain tomorrow morning with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in the north. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, a few showers tomorrow, mainly in the north. Waitomo to Kapiti, including the central high country, fine weather with morning frosts. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cold and showery. Wairarapa and Wellington, showers clearing from Wellington tonight and Wairarapa tomorrow. For all of the South Island, fine in most places and frosty again overnight. Showers developing about Fiordland tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, a few light showers gradually clearing tomorrow. It's 5:08.
Thanks, Katrina. The Olympics coming up. We look back at the women's sevens and forward at the women's football. But we begin tonight with Pike River and the Court of Appeal. Nigel Hampton QC has been arguing that the decision to not prosecute Peter Whittle over the deaths of 29 men in the mine was unprincipled and unprecedented. The Pike CEO did initially face 12 health and safety charges relating to the explosions, but that prosecution was dropped after an insurance payout of $3.4 million in total to the victims' families. 2 of the families who angrily believe that money superseded the legal process and that it denied them the chance for true justice have been appealing against it. Their lawyer, Nigel Hampton, told the Court of Appeal the payment, made without the involvement of any of the families, was designed to buy off a prosecution.
That's the whole point of the issue. Whether, as they did, MB were entitled to take that payment into account as a proper factor in public interest, on public interest grounds, influencing their decision to withdraw or not. Our argument is that money like that, a payment like that, conditional on the charges not proceeding, can never be taken on account, and the actual sum of money doesn't matter. It's the offering of a sum of money on condition that the prosecutions are not proceeded with, which makes it, in our argument, unlawful.
So there has never been a trial of any description, setting aside the Royal Commission. There has never been a court case in which Peter Whittle has been cross-examined, for example, and there has been a formal judicial consideration of how 29 people died in what the Royal Commission describes as a preventable accident.
No, there's never been a case. They decided that they had enough evidence to take criminal nuisance charges under the Crimes Act, but decided not to because by then MB had taken these 12 charges under the Health and Safety and Employment Act against Peter Whittle, and so they decided they wouldn't take the criminal nuisance charge. They didn't want to expose him to double jeopardy. But then, of course, subsequent to that, this offer of money came along, and the health and safety charges fell over as well. So no criminal charges, whether under the Crimes Act or the Health and Safety and Employment Act, have ever been brought before a court and tried.
Which, in the circumstances, an explosion in a mine regarded as preventable in which 29 people died seems unusual.
Well, you're being mild in your description of it. Yeah, and furthermore, Mr. Whittle didn't, when it came to the Pike River Royal Commission in phases 3 and 4, where the real issues about the conditions underground and what might have led to the explosion and the death of the 29 people, he didn't give evidence in front of the Royal Commission on those substantive issues. So we've never had an account from him, whether there in front of the Commission or anywhere else, as to his role leading up to and during those events.
So taking all of that into account, as a precedent, in terms of workplace safety, in terms of culpability, in terms of the responsibility and the buck finding somewhere to stop, what does this tell people who work in situations where there are dangers?
Well, there are two aspects. The decision, we argued, the decision to withdraw the charges or not proceed with the charges leading to them being dismissed was unprincipled and unprecedented. Unprecedented because it is so against what a secure and principled criminal justice system should stand for. Secondly, in weighing their public interest factors before deciding not to offer evidence, the MB, and this is again part of the argument in court today, failed to take into account their responsibilities to administer and enforce the health and safety legislation, their role in that, and to make sure that people abide by the legislation and that their employees are safe and that are held accountable if needs be. That part of it never entered into their consideration of public interest, and that, we say, was a fundamental failing as well. So it's rather a negative view that one could take of enforcement of health and safety responsibilities.
Just before you go, it's an expensive business to go to the appeal court, and my understanding of both Sonia and Anna's situation is that they don't have terribly much money. How is this appeal being mounted? Who is paying for your time?
I'm paying for my time. This is being done pro bono, and lawyers do have social consciences.
And is that why you're doing it? You feel that this is so important and so egregiously wrong that you are prepared to do this without payment?
I feel so exercised by it that I would do it without payment and have done it without payment both in the High Court and here.
Nigel Hampton QC talking to me earlier. Checkpoint invited WorkSafe onto the program tonight, but it declined. However, WorkSafe's lawyer, Joanna Holden, told the Court of Appeal that the payment to Pike River families wasn't the only reason it decided not to proceed with health and safety charges. She says the payment made by Peter Whittle's insurer wasn't a bargain or a deal struck between the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment and Mr Whittle. Joanna Holden says it was decided not to consult with the families because of the large number involved, the difficulty in reaching a consensus, and fears details about the offer would get out. So, what of Peter Whittle himself? What does he say to the families? And where is he now, the former Pike River boss and Pike's very public face in the aftermath of the explosions?
In the days after the Pike explosions, Peter Whittle was a human and reassuring media presence, determined to do his best to get the men out, alive in the first day or two, and then after the second explosion to retrieve their bodies. But yesterday I asked Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse if they had ever
had any first-person explanation from Peter Whittle, who was the CEO?
No. The last conversation I had with Peter Whittle, he was holding my hand, his wife was standing beside me, she was rubbing my arm, and he promised me faithfully that he would do whatever he could to get the men out. That was the last conversation I had with Peter Whittle. He looked me straight in the eye and he made that promise.
And when was that?
That was at the big memorial at Omoto.
Wow.
Within So we've not had a conversation or anything since then.
That was December 2010, 5.5 years ago. Both Sonia Rockhouse, who lost a son, and Anna Osborne, who lost her husband, say they haven't heard from Peter Whittle since. So where is he now? Well, Peter Whittle is now the CEO of Illawarra Diggers, an aged community care and accommodation facility in Wollongong, New South Wales.
Good afternoon, Illawarra Diggers, Fran speaking.
Hello, Fran. It's John Campbell from Radio New Zealand in New Zealand. I'm trying to track down Peter Whittle if he's around.
Just one moment. John, isn't it? John?
Yeah, John Campbell from Radio New Zealand. Thank you so much.
I'll just see. 1 moment.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, he doesn't seem to be available at the moment. Can I have him ring you back, or will you ring back? Or?
Look, yes. Did you manage to speak to him? Did you tell?
No, I didn't. No, he's just not around anywhere.
That was yesterday, when he was at work but couldn't be found. Today, he wasn't at work at all.
I'm after Peter Whittle if Peter's around, please.
He's not today, I'm sorry. He's not in the office. I know you rang yesterday. I didn't know he wasn't going to be in today, so you're able to ring perhaps tomorrow?
Yeah, you don't have a cell phone number for him, do you?
No, I'm sorry, we don't give out that information.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try him again tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed.
All right, thank you.
Have you told him I've called?
I think I did. I think I sent him a message yesterday. Sorry.
So I called the company's PR person and left my number and a message for Peter Whittle to call me. He hasn't. Peter Whittle, who was CEO of Pike when 29 people died in an accident the Royal Commission described as preventable, has never appeared in court and does not want to discuss it with RNZ or, more importantly, with the families. But the families remember his words, his promises. And now, how do they feel?
Very bitter and very distrustful. I mean, we had a lot of promises made to us, and it was just to keep us quiet, and then they would water those promises down over time. I think they thought we would just shut up and go away, but they're very wrong, because Anna and I are not shutting up and we're not going away.
Sonia Rockhouse and Anna Osborne, who were taking that appeal through the appeal court today. It's 90 minutes past 5. The New Zealand women's seven side will come home from Rio with silver medals after a brilliant run through to the final, ended with a heartbreaking loss to a very impressive Australian team. Australia scored 4 tries to New Zealand's 3 to take the match 24-17. Friends and families say they are really proud of the women, who of course made history at Rio in the first Olympic sevens. Sharon Brett-Kelly reports.
They came out on the field to win gold, but the tournament favourites Australia triumphed. 2 tries in the last minutes by New Zealand narrowed the gap, but it was not enough. Tears were already flowing as Tyler Nathan Wong converted the last try. It was a bruising game that exceeded expectations.
But I'm just really proud to be a New Zealander and to be able to represent my country in a sport that I love is a huge honour to me and my family and the sisters that I got to play alongside.
New Zealand scored first in the game, with Kayla McAllister crossing the line to put her team 5-0 up in the first 5 minutes. But Australia evened the score when Emma Tonigato touched down. Though the try was granted, it appeared Tonigato lost the ball forward on the line. When New Zealand's Portia Woodman was given a yellow card shortly before half-time for intentionally knocking the ball down, Australia capitalised with a try on the stroke of half-time. The Australians extended their lead shortly after the break, and despite New Zealand scoring twice in the final few minutes, it was too late for gold. Shakira Baker says they did all they could.
The girls left everything out on that field. We fought right till the end. Unfortunately, some calls went against us, so we had to fight back from those calls.
Portia Woodman says at times New Zealand didn't keep their cool.
A few mistakes that Australia definitely capitalised on, and we knew that they're a good rugby nation, and we knew that we were going to bring it to us every time.
In the stands, Portia's mother, Catherine Woodman, stayed calm.
For me, it was like, if you get a medal, I'm more than happy. If you get a gold, well, absolute bonus, you know. And but I was really calm. If you'd have asked me yesterday and the game that they played then, we were just having heart attacks up there when they were playing to get into the semis.
Sarah Goss says the Olympics have done a lot for women's sevens.
When we came out here, our vision was to inspire young girls to wear the black jersey and to play rugby, and I think we've done that. It showed the crowd that women's sevens is a top sport at the moment, and if we can keep doing that, then Tokyo 2020 is going to be even bigger.
Back in Auckland, Baden Woodman watched his sister Portia score a last-minute try after she was sin-binned, then dropped to her knees in tears after the last whistle.
We are an emotional bunch, very passionate about the game. So what everybody would have witnessed right at the end there was just all that built-up emotion just coming to the fore, and she was really feeling it right then.
A former team member and close friend, Linda Itunu, says they have given up a lot in the last 3 years to get to Rio.
I know how hard these girls have worked and how much sacrifices they've made to get there, and it's just, I guess that's the most heartbreaking part, but apart from that, silver, it's not gold, but silver is still something to be proud about.
She says the players fought to the end.
There was a whole lot of heart there that was shown in that final, and that's something to really be proud of.
They showed a whole lot of heart too in an emotional haka after.
Coming up on Checkpoint, 300 homes still without power in Hawke's Bay and on the Taupo Plains. We'll hear from Lions company UNISON. Meanwhile, 300k away and with no explanation, the residents of an Auckland apartment building will also face their third night without power. And alcohol interlocks to stop drunks starting their cars will become compulsory for high-level drink drive and repeat offenders. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. If you do have feedback, you can text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. It's 24 minutes past 5. About 300 homes are still without power in Hawke's Bay and on the Taupo Plains tonight. And locals have been told to expect the power to be out for a few more days yet. Heavy snow had closed State Highway 5 between Napier and Taupo, but it reopened again today. Earlier today, a meeting was held at the Rangataiki Tavern. We went there live last night, of course, between the Lions company, UNISON, affected residents, civil defence and the local council. UNISON's Danny Gough joins us now. Danny, welcome to the program. Are you there?
Good evening, John. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Where are you talking to us from, Danny?
I'm talking to you from our office here in Hastings, actually, in the heart of Hawke's Bay, John.
OK, so did you drive up to the Rangataiki Tavern? Have you traversed the road today, the highway?
No, unfortunately. Yes, I had every intention after being a key instigator of getting the meeting in place, but with the continued closure of the Napier-Taupo Road, I couldn't get through this morning. Luckily for us, we had key senior staff on the other side at the Taupo end, John, so they got through and we're more than capable of conducting the meeting.
OK, describe, how many power poles have you got down still?
Well, look, we went into today, John, just by way of example, looking at around about sort of 200 poles in that area down. We've gone up in helicopters again and completed our aerial assessments. And unfortunately, John, we're probably staring down the barrel of another 100. So we could be looking in anywhere around the 300 power poles down, Mark. It's like a war zone, to be frank.
And Danny, can you describe the power poles? What are they? What do you have in the Central North Island?
So we have a combination in that particular part of the network, John, a combination of what we call hardwood poles, which are very good, proven poles on networks across New Zealand, and concrete poles. And they've just been, in some cases, just broken like twigs, to be honest. Even the steel reinforced ones, John, have just buckled and gone.
And that is just the sheer weight of the snow. I had this discussion yesterday, but can we just clarify? It wasn't high winds, it's just the sheer snowfall.
Absolutely. It's what we call snow loading, John. So in this particular fall was a combination of heavy snow in a short duration and a wet snow. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's a heavy snow. So it basically settles and under the load, if you like, it basically causes something to give. And when you get one or two poles go, John, it creates a domino effect.
Okay, and so how long do you think it will take to get them back up and restore power to these homes?
So, look, we have got a mammoth task, and look, I can't understate that, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it for anybody. We had a very positive and productive meeting with the good folk up there in the Taupo Plains area today. Look, they're resilient people. They're good rural folk. They're used to having snowfalls. The difference here is this is a unique experience. I mean, in my 10 years in this particular company in this area, I've never seen anything like it, and I'm hearing that from different people, farmers themselves. So we were hoping, best case scenario, as of yesterday, to say, look, we could be 1 week, it could be longer. We're now saying, look, this could be a matter of weeks. This could be anywhere up to a month, John, and we're starting now to think about, whilst we do the restoration, and rest assured we will be throwing multiple crews. We'll have anywhere up to 17 crews, so we'll be throwing in excess of over 100 different people at this job. We're now moving to looking at potentially putting generation in to get these people up and running in a much shorter time frame than potentially the weeks that we're looking at.
Yeah, I guess. Look, you're right. They are hardy types, and this is a cold part of the country over winter, but equally there is a reasonable expectation that they will have power, and if there is a big storm, that you will be able to restore it in less than a month, surely.
Look, John, remember, it's a progressive restoration here. We're looking at a radius of around 60 kilometres, so this is a significant piece of work. So what we're saying is we're being open and honest about the task in hand, and our biggest problem, John, and I don't know if you've seen any images, but the snowfall is incredible. We've got a metre and a half of snow in places, and now with the cold temperatures, it's freezing, so it's not going anywhere fast. John, so we've got to get in there for a start. Now, we may not even be able to get access for potentially a week yet, so it is a major undertaking. So what we're trying to do is we're having now daily meetings with those people. We're meeting every day at the Rangitaiki Tavern, and we're going to give them every update. So, look, you did right, and they should expect a good supply of power. Just because they're rural shouldn't make a difference, and we totally understand that. We do understand, that they're hurting and they're suffering. But so what we're going to do, we're not going to muck around and say, well, bad luck. We're saying, look, we're going to carry out the restoration, but while we're going to do that, we're going to get you up and running, and we're going to use generation or whatever other means we can to do that in a much more timely manner than potentially, as you say, John, the weeks or potentially a month. So we're taking a proactive stance on this one.
Danny GOUGH from UNISON, thank you so much for joining us, Danny, live over an increasingly croaky old phone. The government is considering boosting police numbers to keep up with the growing population. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says there needs to be a significant increase in police numbers, equalling between 1,000 and 2,000 over the next 5 years. Mr Peters says New Zealand is lagging behind Australia in the number of police per capita and should at the very least match that. He's made it a pre-election bottom line for his party. The Prime Minister John Campbell says the government is considering some kind of increase. Police Minister Judith Collins joins us now live on the phone. Welcome back to the program, Minister. Winston Peters giving you a little shove, or is that just a coincidence that this announcement should come out today?
No, it's definitely a coincidence. I've been working on it for quite some time, talking to the Prime Minister well before recess about that's just gone, a couple of months ago, about the need to look at the police resources, and I've been talking to my colleagues, including the Minister of Finance, about it. So we've got a big increase in the population over the last 8 years. It's gone up by 400,000 people. We've now got a lot more tourists than we used to have. We have far more calls on family violence to police. So we've done a lot of effort around saying to people, please report family violence, and there's been a 100% increase in family violence reporting since 2009, and a 51% increase in combined mental health incidents since that time, and police are the people who spend that time on that, and they are the first port of call. So, it's demand is driving this, and it's an issue that I've taken to colleagues, and police have been working on some work for me.
There was a police association survey earlier in the year. 86% of frontline police officers felt that they were under-resourced, that they were simply struggling to do their jobs. We have burglaries up 13% year on year. So this is a response to an absolute and actual need, isn't it?
Well, it is an actual need, and I have been listening to it. I've been the minister, as you know, for this year so far, and I'm also very aware of our commitment when we came into government to have one police officer for 500 of the public, and with the big increase in population, that's now moved up to 1 to 526. So we need to address that, but we've done lots of things around technology and all those sorts of things to help police do their job even better, more efficiently and effectively than they are. But the fact is that we now expect police to spend a lot more time on family violence issues and all the sorts of things actually that I think the public would expect. And I think too, John, is that we have a situation where people in New Zealand have huge public trust and confidence in police, which is at 78%, so they are the first people that you call.
What, you said you spoke to Bill English. What will this cost, do you think?
Well, obviously we're working through the figures, and obviously we'll be putting up some options to my colleagues. But, it would be remiss of me if I went saying exactly what I'm after. But
Ballpark?
No, well, I'm not going to go down that track, John, but you can expect that I will always support police to get the resources they need.
You see, the thing is, if you're not going down the track, it does seem as if you have been pushed forward somewhat from a more deliberate announcement by Winston Peters, who at 12:46 today sent out a media release calling for an increase in police numbers.
Well, no, John, the Prime Minister was simply asked by the media, I think, today in response to that, what was happening, and the Prime Minister said that it is likely that we would be looking to increase police numbers, and that's the reason that the Prime Minister said that, is because he was asked that question. I was then asked, and I've confirmed that that's exactly what I'm looking at, and I've been working on it for some time, and police have been working on it for some time for me. So it's, I think that what Mr. Peters has done is to pick up on the fact that we've noticed that we do need to have more police numbers, and police have been asking for it as well.
Judith Collins, Police Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Minister, it's 27 minutes to 6. Coming up on Checkpoint, primary and secondary teacher unions band together to battle the government over a proposal to change the way schools are funded. A suicide bomber in Pakistan kills at least 70 people and wounds 100 in an attack on mourners gathering outside a hospital in Quetta. What on earth are these people after? We crossed the Quetta, but first, Katrina Batten with RNZ Headlines.
The Prime Minister John Key says the government is considering boosting police numbers to keep up with the growing population. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says a pre-election bottom line for his party would be a significant increase in police numbers, equalling between 1 and 2,000 over the next 5 years. Mr Key says any increase wouldn't be because Mr Peters wants it, but because it would be appropriate as the population grows. A murder trial has heard the police carried out extensive surveillance on the man accused of killing a road worker and on his family during their investigation. Quinton Winders is on trial charged with murdering George Taiaroa near Atiamuri in March 2013. A detective has told the High Court in Rotorua listening devices were placed in vehicles owned by the Winders family and in their homes and on their telephones. The Court of Appeal has been told the decision not to proceed with health and safety charges over the Pike River mine disaster was unprecedented and unprincipled. Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse are taking a judicial review after the High Court turned down their application to review WorkSafe's decision to drop charges against the mine's chief executive, Peter Whittle. The government now says it was aware in May of a possible trade dispute with China, and the two governments discussed trade competition at that time. But the Minister, Todd McClay, insists the law prevents him from saying exactly what the dispute is about. Alcohol interlocks will soon become compulsory for serious drink drivers and repeat offenders. The Associate Transport Minister, Craig Foss, has announced anyone caught drink driving twice within 5 years or anyone caught with more than 3.2 times over the legal limit will receive an interlock sentence. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell, and reporting season is underway. Who's out of the starting gate today, Jonathan?
We had the rural services firm PGG Wrightson out today with a net profit in the year to the end of June around $40 million. That's up about a quarter on last year's result, helped by gains on asset sales and a lower tax bill. It's quite a strong result for a rural firm. Obviously, the agriculture sector is doing it quite tough at the moment, led by the dairy sector weakness, and that did have some effect on some of their divisions, led by livestock. But there were some green shoots coming through for the firm. Their sea and grain divisions performed quite well, along with retail. Real estate actually performed better too, higher sales of farm blocks.
Did PGG give any guidance, Jonathan?
They're going to provide a bit more steer about their 2017 earnings at the annual meeting in October.
Right.
They have said, though, that this current financial year that they're in now will be a tougher trading year. At the moment, though, they're happy with their portfolio. They're wanting to get the most returns out of all their assets. They have pointed out, though, that they are looking at bringing in a new strategy, and they're going to announce that in a couple of months.
Jonathan, I see elsewhere there's been a warning from clothing retailer Hallenstein Glass, and is that about a fall in profit, is it?
Yeah, they're forecasting a lower net profit, down 22% to about $13.5 million in the year to August. They're blaming a few things, actually: a lower currency, the warmer weather this year, especially leading into winter. But more to the point, they're saying ineffective management is to blame. They've said they've fixed this by bringing in Di Humphreys. She used to be with the firm. She's now leading the Glassons chain. She was previously with Pumpkin Patch. And since about June, Hallenstein Glassons has said they've noticed a pickup in their performance, but obviously not enough to improve the net profit.
Right. Boy, oh boy, it's tough times for them. Sky City, big day for them tomorrow, and I suspect their numbers are going to be much, much bigger.
That's right. Markets pricing in somewhere around $160 million for the year to the end of June. That would be up about $30 million on last year's result. It's been quite an interesting time for Sky City, I guess. More recently, the resignation of the chief executive, Nigel Morrison. It will be interesting to see. We'll be watching out for how the Auckland flagship casino performs when those results come out tomorrow.
Thanks, Jonathan. What happened on the markets today?
We hit another record, up 15 points, 7363. The dollar fairly flat, 71.28 US cents, just over 93 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell joining us live from the Wellington newsroom. Thanks, Jonathan. Alcohol interlocks to stop drunks starting their cars will soon become compulsory for high-level drink drivers. That's a big offence, or repeat offenders. Under tougher new rules announced by the government today, anyone caught drink driving twice within 5 years or anyone caught more than 3 times over the legal limit will receive an interlock sentence. It estimates between 4,000 and 5,000 drivers a year will be forced to have the drivers fitted. Yes, you did hear that number correctly. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
The interlocks are installed in the car and prevent it from starting if alcohol is detected on the driver's breath. The Associate Transport Minister, Craig Foss, says alcohol interlocks were previously an option at sentencing for the worst drink drivers. Now they'll be mandatory.
The mission here is to keep New Zealanders safe on the road, to keep those offenders actually safe, and to start to address and hopefully change behaviour.
There are obvious flaws with the technology. Drink drivers can get sober people to blow in their interlocks, but Mr Foss says despite the flaws, they're still worth it.
Sadly, if some people want to abuse a system, they will, but there are significant penalties for those that try to abuse or misuse the system or tamper with the system. There are other advances coming in this space. Some interlocks actually also come with a camera to prove who the person is, where they are.
A repeat drink driver, Luke Bickerstaff, says the interlock made him realise his behaviour was reckless.
My experience initially was frustrating, but after coming out of the program, it's a genuine lifesaver. It changes your whole behaviour and attitude towards drink driving. sort of forces you to get into good habits around driving and considering what you're doing when you're drinking and that type of thing.
Mr Bickerstaff says he attempted to start his car after drinking at the start of the sentence, but the interlock wouldn't allow it. He says he wouldn't consider it now and recommends other drink drivers think about getting them too.
If I didn't have that device in the car, I could have potentially been injured in an accident. I could have injured someone else. I could have had someone else's blood on my hands if I had had a serious accident.
A previous criticism of alcohol interlocks is that they've had to be funded by the drink drivers themselves. But the cost, between $2,400 and $2,800 for a 12-month sentence, has meant some offenders haven't been able to afford them. The government's proposing putting $4 million of financial assistance into the scheme, but it's not yet clear exactly to what degree that would reduce costs for those who have to fit the devices. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
In the latest version of events over contact with China about trade competition, the Trade Minister now says the government was aware back in May that China had trade concerns. Todd McClay says there were discussions between the two governments at that time. Amid all of this, there's been a temporary ban on New Zealand kiwi fruit exports to China since last week after authorities said a fungus had been found in 2 containers. With this ever-changing story, here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Last month it emerged the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade had been investigating claims industry players in China had warned the kiwifruit exporter Zespri of possible trade retaliation if New Zealand investigated claims of steel dumping. Reports initially dismissed by the Trade Minister Todd McClay as extremely hypothetical. Now he says the two governments were discussing concerns back in May.
There was contact between the New Zealand government and the Chinese government in late May. I can't go into the detail of exactly what that is. Again, that's as a result of legislation around any pretending or potential competition issue.
However, Mr McClay insists the law prevents him from saying exactly what the dispute is about. In Parliament, the Labour leader Andrew Little questioned the Prime Minister John Key about the comments he himself made when the first media reports came out last month.
Does he stand by his statement that threats of trade retaliation by China if New Zealand investigates substandard Chinese steel imports are unsubstantiated rumours, given his government has been discussing that threat with China since May?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister. Speaker, yes, every time the issue of possible retaliatory action against our exports have been raised, New Zealand has sought and received assurances from China.
Mr Little then asked Mr Key about reports of a steel dumping complaint being laid with the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment.
Was the government's decision not to investigate substandard Chinese steel imports connected to trade threats from China, or is that just a coincidence?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Speaker, I'm not aware of a decision the government's made in regard to that.
Andrew Little then asked about the temporary halt of kiwifruit exports to China, New Zealand's largest market.
Why is it acceptable for China to ban New Zealand exports for containing a fungus that poses no health hazard and has been present on our kiwifruit exports to China for years?
The member is leader of the opposition, and on the basis of that, he has some responsibility at least to get the facts vaguely correct. The facts are that Zespri voluntarily stopped sending exports for about a week of kiwi fruit to China. They have not been banned by the Chinese.
There has still been no official confirmation about whether or not New Zealand authorities have received a complaint from a New Zealand company about steel dumping from China, as authorities can't legally comment on any complaint until a formal investigation is confirmed. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Primary and secondary teacher unions have banded together in an unprecedented step to battle the government over a proposal to change the way schools are funded. The Educational Institute and the PPTA today announced they'll hold 50 joint meetings around the country next month for their 60,000 plus teacher members. Those meetings are likely to disrupt classes as schools will probably need to start late or finish early while they're being held. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen filed this report.
The unions want a joint mandate to oppose the government's global budget suggestion that would let schools sack teachers and use the money to buy computers or hire teacher aides instead. The president of the Educational Institute, Louise Green, says the NZEI and the PPTA have never before held joint member meetings, but they're doing it now because the plan would hurt the quality of education.
There's a good chance that teacher salaries would be traded off so that other costs can be met. And when teachers are traded off, then class sizes will go up. Curriculum choices can be restricted. There could be non-qualified teachers employed because they're cheaper, those kinds of things.
The PPTA's junior vice president, Hutt Valley teacher Jack Boyle, says teachers of subjects that attract relatively few students will be at risk.
Amongst teachers, there is very real concern that those teachers in smaller subjects will suddenly be on pretty shaky ground. So, for instance, you tend to get lower levels of student participation in subjects like music, like ICT, like the performing arts subjects, and like languages. Those subjects potentially are at risk.
The president of the Post-Primary Teachers Association, Angela Roberts, hopes the unions are not on a collision course with the government, but she says it needs to know that its plans for the funding system are a bad idea.
The opportunity for the government to make one massive mistake that is going to have repercussions right across the sector is significant, and somebody needs to stand up and tell Cabinet they're heading off in the wrong direction.
Angela Roberts says the government has indicated it will not push ahead with anything the education sector opposes, and she hopes it will stick to its word. The Education Minister, Hekia Parata, told RNZ News that might depend on what the unions are actually opposing.
As long as it's based on the actual proposals as opposed to the misrepresented ones.
Then you won't go ahead with that at the sector?
Well, we're still in a process, and that's what I understand we're in, and I look forward to continuing that process.
Hekia Parata says she's disappointed and surprised by the union's actions. The unions plan to hold about 50 paid union meetings around the country over a 2-week period starting on September the 5th. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
A suicide bomber in Pakistan killed at least 70 people and wounded more than 100 in an attack on mourners gathered at a hospital in Quetta. Eyewitnesses say the bomber struck as a crowd of mostly lawyers and journalists crammed into the emergency department to accompany the body of a lawyer who was the former president of the Regional Bar Association. He had been shot. Financial Times correspondent in Pakistan, Farhan Bakari, described what happened as the people gathered to support him at the hospital.
A suicide bomber wearing a suicide jacket, apparently with at least 8 kilograms of explosives, arrives at the scene, goes right in the middle of this crowd and blows himself up and kills more than 70 people, at least 70 people so far.
And because of the nature of what was already happening at the hospital, these were lawyers, journalists, family members, friends.
Absolutely, a big crowd of people, a few of them known to me personally, and they just arrived at the hospital as an expression of goodwill, support for the lawyer who'd been killed just a couple of hours before. The journalists were there for coverage, and that's when this dreadful incident happened.
Farhan, who did you know who was there, and are they okay?
Well, one of them, unfortunately, a young TV cameraman whom I knew, just 26 years old, he's died. And this is somebody for whom I developed a great deal of affection and respect. I'd met him a number of times. He came from a very poor family background, and just through sheer hard work, made it through the difficult world of TV journalism these days. A very tragic story.
Farhan, when these people are going to this much trouble, and when it is so premeditated and so willful, what is the end game? What are they hoping to achieve, and why?
John, I wish I could have I could give you a half sensible answer to that, because that's a question which I've asked militants as well. And believe it or not, many of them have turned around and come up with a bizarre answer. For them, this is a way to paradise. This is a way to heaven, that they create mayhem, that they kill innocent people who in their eyes are sinful, and this is their route to heaven. What can you say in response to such utter and absolute madness? This is madness. There's no other way to describe this.
And it's madness that it's almost impossible to combat. A suicide bomber wearing a suicide vest walking into a crowd. How can Pakistan possibly address this?
That's a good question to which, sadly and tragically, there are no good answers yet. For the past 2 years, the Pakistan Army has fought militants and has done what appears to be a good job in terms of taking back territory from militant groups on the Afghan border. But beyond that, you really need to completely revamp the civil policing and administrative structure. And that is where politicians have to play a much smarter game than what they're doing right now. What is the difference between Pakistan and a country like New Zealand, for example, when it comes to policing on the streets? Well, the biggest difference is that in a country like New Zealand, you have policemen who are trained much better. There are mechanisms for internal security and internal controls within police departments. Tragically, in Pakistan, those mechanisms are not there. And last but not the least, the police is also highly politicized, working not in the interest of the public, but mostly to promote the interests of influential politicians. And this is the mess that you get at the end of the day. The police in Pakistan today does not even appear to have a functional well-run internal intelligence gathering network that could take them to gather timely information on what is going on in different neighborhoods. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Farhan Bakari, who is the Financial Times correspondent in Pakistan, talking to us a short time ago. It's 8 minutes to 6, the most reckless president in American history. That's the verdict from 50 prominent Republican foreign policy and national security experts, many veterans of George W. Bush's administration, on the outcome if Donald Trump wins the keys to the Oval Office. They've signed a letter denouncing Mr. Trump's candidacy and pledging not to vote for him. And it dropped on a day Mr. Trump was hoping to get his campaign back on track with a new economic policy speech. CNN's Dana Bash with this report.
A who's who of the Republican foreign policy world, coordinating an unprecedented effort to stop their party's nominee from winning the White House. 50 former GOP national security officials signing a letter saying, quote, Donald Trump is not qualified to be president and commander-in-chief. Indeed, we are convinced that he would be a dangerous president and would put at risk our country's national security and well-being. Quote, we are convinced that in the Oval Office, he would be the most reckless president in American history. The letter was released just as Trump was finishing his speech in Detroit aimed at trying to alleviate concerns those GOP national security experts voiced, like lack of self-control. Usually when Trump is interrupted by protesters, he insults them. Today, his economic policy speech was disrupted 14 times, but he bit his tongue, except to say this.
The Bernie Sanders people had far more energy and spirit, I will say that.
After a tumultuous week, it was Trump's attempt to get back to basics.
We need to stop believing in politicians and start believing in our great country.
A detailed economic policy speech, but with a more fundamental goal, reminding voters he's an outsider, eager to disrupt a broken system.
Our party has chosen to make new history by selecting a nominee from the outside, and that's outside of the very, very already proven rigged system.
But he also used his speech to the Detroit Economic Club, business people, to talk tax cuts and court college-educated, wealthier GOP voters that polls show Trump may be at risk of losing.
We're reducing your taxes from 35% to 15%.
Trump even dumped his own tax reform proposal, wiped it from his website, and adopted the House Republican plan.
My plan will reduce the current number of brackets from 7 to 3 and dramatically streamline the process.
That report from CNN. We were in the central North Island before, where snow has taken down 300 power poles and people are without power. They're without power in one of Auckland's most plush apartment and hotel buildings too, and they have no idea why. Rebecca McLeod lives in the building with her husband and 7-week-old baby, and so they're getting to know their neighbours as everyone is gathering in the hallways and corridors where bizarrely electricity remains. This is day 3 of this situation. They've moved their fridge, microwave and kettle into the hallway.
I got an extension cord this morning, and because the hallway is working, the power is in the hallway, so we attached the extension cord from the hallway into the apartment so I could do my washing. So we're just sort of making do, really. We moved our freezer, our microwave and our kettle into the hallway and just said help yourself if you need to use it. And so people have sort of been coming out of the woodwork and introducing themselves and talking to each other, which is quite cool because it doesn't always happen. It's getting colder as we've had a couple of days without power, and now the heat's started to dissipate from the apartment, and there's no sun.
Yes, temperatures got below 5 degrees in Auckland this morning, which is cold by the city standards. Residents have had a guts full. One, Ben, told me when he lost power.
Well, I went up for dinner on Sunday night, John, at about 7 o'clock, came home around 9, and there was no power. It was quite eerie, really. There was no power in the common areas down in the where the hotel reception is, and no power in the units. And they said it would be on sometime that night, and then of course it wasn't on in the morning, and that was for Monday morning. Now it's Tuesday night, and they've told us it definitely won't be back on again tonight.
What floor are you on, Ben?
28.
So how do you get to your apartment?
Oh, well, the lifts do work, although last night, after I obviously went out for dinner last night because there was no opportunity to really cook, the lifts weren't working, so that was 28 floors of stairs to climb up.
And what is the reason you've been given for the fact that in this central city building where a surprisingly large number of people live, there is no electricity?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I've been living here since 2009, and there's been power cuts in central Auckland before, and the metropolis has been going strong because there's obviously good generators there, but not the case this time. The metropolis is in darkness and everything else is going just fine. Firstly, I was told it was a vector issue. And then there was some part that broke, and then there's some more that's been ordered, or there's some that's being built, but the latest story is something's coming from overseas.
So something's coming from overseas, you don't know what and you don't know when it's going to arrive?
Definitely not today. Definitely not tonight. They don't have the part they need in New Zealand.
Right, and do you know what that part is? Is this ringing true to you, Ben?
I've got no idea, but I apparently there's no problem with supply of electricity at the building, I was told, but who knows? Getting all sorts of bits and pieces from everybody, really. But I think tonight the smart option's a hotel. I'm going down country tomorrow, and I need to get ready before 6. So I don't really fancy getting ready in the dark. So it'll be a hotel for me tonight.
Are they going to pay your costs?
I haven't gone down that road yet. Just want to be warm.
How cold has it been,
It's a concrete building. Well, I mean, Auckland's probably about as cold as it's been all year at the moment. I think it was down to less than 5 degrees last night. Concrete building's not too warm with no heating when it's 5 degrees outside.
Hundreds of people live in that building. Completely inexplicable power failure. The operations manager for the Metropolis Apartments say there is no backup option whatsoever. Amit Anand told our reporter Michelle Cook that power won't be restored until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest.
Since Sunday evening, there was a problem from the Vector side. Not only this building, there are some other buildings also being affected. So when they tried to turn it back on last night, and this is our main generator room, so it's completely blown off. So they don't have any parts at the moment. So they are getting it sourced from Christchurch. So we are waiting for that, and let's see how it goes. So definitely we are not getting any power tonight. We are hoping it by tomorrow morning. But even though 20 people will be working from tomorrow morning, it will take another 7 to 8 hours to get it back.
which is all rather confusing because Vector tell us it's got nothing to do with them, so we've no idea what's going on in that building. Yes, most bewildering. It is coming up to 6 o'clock on Checkpoints. After the news at 6, more cops on the beat, a second Olympic silver and the little ski field that could. But let's just take some time to enjoy the RNZ Pips. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's 6 o'clock, however you are joining us, whether it is via the radio or streaming live on the RNZ website or screening live on Freeview Channel 50. Thank you for your company. We are delighted to have you with us. It's 6 o'clock on Checkpoint, and it is time to introduce Katrina Batten with the RNZ News.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Prime Minister says the government is considering boosting police numbers to keep up with the growing population. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says a pre-election bottom line for his party would be a significant increase in police numbers, equalling between 1,000 and 2,000 over the next 5 years. John Campbell says any increase in police numbers won't be because Winston Peters wants them. The Police Minister Judith told reporters at Parliament she's committed to getting police all of the resources that they need.
I think that the police know exactly what they need, and I'm not going to talk about specifics about things, but I'm certainly talking to the Prime Minister and my colleagues about more resourcing for police as needed.
The Police Minister Judith Collins. The lawyer representing Pike River families says the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment shouldn't have let a $3 million reparation payment influence its decision to not proceed with charges. Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse are taking a judicial review after the High Court turned down their application to review WorkSafe's decision to drop charges against the mine's chief executive, Peter Whittle. The pair's lawyer, Nigel HAMPTON QC, says a payment like that, conditional on the charges not proceeding, should have never have been included in the ministry's decision-making.
MB failed to take into account their responsibilities to administer and enforce the health and safety legislation and to make sure that people abide by the legislation and that their employees are safe and that are held accountable if needs be.
Lawyer Nigel HAMPTON QC. A bitter row has developed between the Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump, and 50 US security experts who have questioned his ability to be president. The officials, including a former CIA director and 2 Homeland Security chiefs, issued a statement accusing Mr. Trump of lacking the character, values and experience required for the top job. They predicted he would be the most reckless president in American history. A former State Department counsel, Andrew Zickerlo, is one of the signatories.
Donald Trump is a reality TV show star. When it comes to reality, instead of reality TV, Donald Trump is simply not qualified to be considered as a future president.
Signatory Andrew Zillico. Mr. Trump has described the signatories as belonging to failed Washington elite. A Wellington grocery store has been ordered to pay more than $53,000 in penalties and arrears for exploiting a migrant worker. The Employment Relations Authority says Luv Kumar Kata, who operated the Willow Street store Sun to Moon, breached a number of employment standards, including demanding the worker pay more than $11,000 to him in premiums. Laura Bootham reports.
The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment brought the complaint and says the penalty sends a clear message that exploitation will not be tolerated. Its Labour Inspectorate Regional Manager, Louis Ward, says the worker was paid less than the minimum wage, was not paid for all the hours worked and did not receive holiday pay or additional pay for working on public holidays. Ms Ward says the worker had to make an initial payment of $5,000 to Mr Cutter to secure the job. Ko Laura Bootham Dene.
The president of the Post-Primary Teachers Association, Angela Roberts, says the government risks making a massive mistake with the education funding system. The union and the Primary School and Early Childhood Staff Union, the NZEI, have agreed to hold joint member meetings next month because of proposed changes to school and early childhood funding. Angela Roberts says the government has suggested letting schools trade funding for teachers for funding that can be used on other things. She says that's a bad idea.
The opportunity for the government to make one massive mistake that is going to have repercussions right across the sector is significant, and somebody needs to stand up and tell Cabinet they're heading off in the wrong direction.
Angela Roberts says the government has indicated it will not push ahead with anything the education sector opposes, and she hopes it will stick to its word. News just in, the police are not going to take action against the Chiefs rugby players who allegedly mistreated a stripper at a function last week. The Waikato police say they've spoken with the woman, known as Scarlett, who raised concerns about the behaviour of some of those in attendance at last week's rugby function. They say based on these discussions, which include in consideration of her wishes and the information currently available to them, they will not be taking the matter further. However, they say this decision may be reviewed if new information comes to light. A 21-year-old man has been charged with criminal nuisance over a power cut that caused a Taupo woman's ventilator to fail in January this year. The woman died later that morning. Joe O'Brien reports.
The police say the Rotorua man has been charged with criminal nuisance after a street sign and 3 power poles were driven into in the early hours of January the 30th, causing a number of residents to lose power. They say Taupo woman Faye Dean died later that morning after her ventilator failed due to the power cut. Taupo Detective Senior Sergeant Matt Cranshaw says a charge of criminal nuisance has been identified as the most appropriate following interviews with witnesses. The man is to appear in the Taupo District Court tomorrow. This is Joe O'Brien.
In sport, pushing aside the sting of missing out on an Olympic gold, the New Zealand women's sevens captain says the side has a bright future. The team had to settle for silver after they were beaten 24-17 by Australia in the final in Rio. New Zealand has the youngest team in the Olympics women's sevens program. Sarah Goss says that bodes well for them, and she believes the women's game in New Zealand will benefit from their trailblazing efforts.
When we came out here, our vision was to inspire young girls to, to wear the black jersey and to play rugby, and I think we've done that. It showed the crowd that women's sevens is a top sport at the moment, and if we can keep doing that, then Tokyo 2020 is going to be even bigger.
Sarah Goss. Meanwhile, the men's sevens team begin their Rio campaign tomorrow morning, and veteran DJ Forbes concedes the Olympic Games brings added expectations.
Just the whole environment I set up, and obviously we know the pressure that comes with any pinnacle sport, any pinnacle event, and obviously Olympics being the biggest stage, there's going to be that there, but when you're playing a bit of footy, everyone expects you to do well, especially when you're wearing that silver fern.
New Zealand's first pool game is against Japan at 3:30 in the morning. The New Zealand women's football coach Tony Reddings is thrilled FIFA have overturned the red card received by captain Abby Erceg in the 1-0 win over Colombia in Rio. Erceg has had her one-match ban lifted, meaning she's now free to play in tomorrow morning's crunch pool game against France, which the football ferns must win to guarantee their place in the knockout stage. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the African cake-making odyssey of Beck Stanley. We have part 2 of our Wind on the Wood of graffiti. This evening we're in Brazil, just in time for the Olympics. This week's pundit, Shannon Honui Thompson, mourns the passing of Ngā Pōwehi, leading exponent of the modern Māori haka. And this evening's WOMAD gig is 47 Soul, all the way from Palestine, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland and Great Barrier Island. Occasional rain or showers, sometimes heavy with possible thunderstorms, hail and localised downpours in the east. Auckland and Coromandel, showers turning to rain tomorrow morning with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in the north. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, a few showers tomorrow, mainly in the north. Waitomo to Kapiti, including the central high country, fine weather with morning frosts. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cold and showery. Wairarapa and Wellington, showers clearing from Wellington tonight and Wairarapa tomorrow. For all of the South Island, fine in most places and frosty again overnight. Showers developing about Fiordland tomorrow. The Chatham Islands, a few light showers, gradually clearing tomorrow. It's just gone 6:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. More from the Women's Sevens team in a couple of minutes. But first, the government says it's considering boosting police numbers, but it's playing down suggestions that New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has forced its hand. Mr Peters is calling for a significant increase in police numbers between 1 and 2,000 over the next 5 years. He says New Zealand is lagging behind Australia in the number of police per capita and should, at the very least, catch up. And it has made a pre-election bottom line for his party to have police numbers increase. Well, the Prime Minister, John Campbell, says the government is considering some kind of increase to keep up with the growing population.
We're not ruling out that there'll be more police, but it won't be because Winston Peters wants them. It's because it's appropriate as our population grows. There'll likely be an increase in the number of constabulary forces that we have.
So, it was all just a coincidence today. Police Minister Judith Collins told Checkpoint she's been discussing police numbers for months. She says the announcement is simply a reaction to increasing demand.
We've done lots of things around technology and all those sorts of things to help police do their job even better, more efficiently and effectively than they are. But the fact is that we now expect police to spend a lot more time on family violence issues and all the sorts of things actually that I think the public would expect.
What, you said you spoke to Bill English. What will this cost, do you think?
Well, obviously we're working through the figures, and obviously we'll be putting up some options to my colleagues. But it would be remiss of me if I went saying exactly what I'm after. But
ballpark?
No, well, I'm not going to go down that track, John. But you can expect that I will always support police to get the resources.
You see, the thing is, if you're not going down the track, it does seem as if you have been pushed forward somewhat from a more deliberate announcement by Winston Peters, who at 12:46 today sent out a media release calling for an increase in police numbers.
Well, no, John, the Prime Minister was simply asked by the media, I think, today in response to that, what was happening, and the Prime Minister said that it is likely that we would be looking to increase police numbers, and that's the reason that the Prime Minister said that, is because he was asked that question. I was then asked, and I've confirmed that that's exactly what I'm looking at, and I've been working on it for some time, and police have been working on it for some time for me.
Judith Collins talking to us about 45 minutes ago, roughly. New Zealand Women's Sevens team are finishing their time in Rio with a silver medal and their heads held high. The New Zealanders were beaten 24-17 by tournament favourites and world number one Australia this morning. As much as it pains me to say this, that Australian team are pretty fantastic, really. It's the second silver medal for this country's Olympic team. After the game, player Portia Woodman and her mum Catherine told sports reporter Barry Guy that while they're obviously disappointed to miss out on a gold, a silver medal is, of course, nothing to be scoffed at.
Yeah, it was a tough game. A few mistakes that Australia definitely capitalised on, and we knew that they're a good rugby nation, and we knew that we were going to bring it to us every time.
They were the World Series champions, so did you have a specific plan? How were you going to attack the game?
We knew they're a really good rugby side and they really know how to read the play. So we just thought we have to make do with the ball that we have and be patient and have patience on attack and defence. I think a couple of times we didn't do that and it happened and it ended up in a try for them.
Catherine,
Yes.
How were you in the stands?
I was extremely calm, and I think that's because I think the biggest thing was getting to where they could get a medal. For me, it was like, if you get a medal, I'm more than happy. If you get a gold, well, absolute bonus, but I was really calm. If you'd have asked me yesterday and the game that they played then, we were just having heart attacks up there when they were playing to get into the semis, because we knew if they didn't win that game and the one this morning, then there would be no medal, So at least if they go back with a medal, it's like kind of payback to New Zealand rugby, to the New Zealand public, and all the people that support them.
A word perhaps of the effort that Portia's put in over the years perhaps to get to this situation?
Yeah. You have to work hard, and she knows that she's a really hard worker. But I think a lot of it too has been, it's been fun for her. It's that old saying that she doesn't get up to go to work. She just, what's the saying? It's
If you
work.
love it, you'll do it.
Yeah, she just loves it. So it's not work. So she gets up every morning and goes and trains and does everything, and it's not work for her. Yeah. So
And you're going to continue to get up and go to work? What's the future for you?
Yes, we'll have a bit of a break and then onwards to the next World Series, and we'll look forward to Japan 2020.
Very good. Just got one more look at that silver medal there.
Yeah.
Well done. Congratulations.
Awesome.
Thank you.
The Woodman women, Catherine, Mum and Portia, of course, 7-star, standing very proudly side by side as the women's sevens team took silver at the Olympics. The women's football team were getting some very welcome news indeed. Their skipper, Abby Urseg, who'd been suspended after receiving a red card in their victory over Colombia, had her red card and therefore her suspension overturned. Abby Urseg is a veteran of well over 100 games for New Zealand. She's also a New York-based professional playing in the US National Women's Soccer League. She's a fine player. And as the Football Ferns coach, Tony Reddings, told me, with a must-win game against France ahead of them, she is really welcome back.
Yeah, she is, and I mean, it's hard to. I mean, she's the most capped player. You said she's got lots of experience, and she's a leader. So to replace that would have been difficult. I mean, we've got good players that would have stepped up, no doubt, and we already had plans in place for that. But it is hard to replace, and I think probably true testament to that will be the way that, you know, since she's been red carded, and the assumption we've been working on is that she would be suspended because we was dealing with the worst case scenario, and she's been positive around the team, you know, pushing the team in training and all those things that you'd expect from a good leader. She's done when I guess the easier thing would have been to, you know, gone in your shell a little bit and felt sorry for yourself, but she stepped up even more. So to get a boost like that after training today was fantastic for not only her, and the whole team celebrated because they knew it was the right thing and justice had prevailed. So, you know, everyone's really happy, and it just makes us, like I said, a little bit more confident going into tomorrow to have the full strength squad available.
Gosh, she's a class act, isn't she? Because given the quality of that decision, which truly was appalling, she would have had every right to feel aggrieved. But she has been absolutely participating and absolutely encouraging the team, has she?
Yeah, she's been fantastic and really upbeat. I was surprised how upbeat she was, and upbeat. I think one of those things, there's just nothing she can do about it now. She knew it was a bad decision, but she knew that what the team needed was her to be upbeat, be her usual self, and lead in the way that she normally does, because we need to get a result tomorrow. So she's just done and behaved in the way that's best for the team, and I think that's just true testament to what a person she is. So no, it's been great.
Tony, can we talk about the game against France? Gosh, you're in a tough pool. You've got the world number ones, the US. You've already played them, and you held them to a 2-0 defeat. We'll come and talk about that. But now next game is the world number 3, France, and you have to win.
Yeah, so it's a big game. And I mean, we came into this tournament and we knew it was a tough group when we drew it, and we could have looked at that two ways. We could have, said it's going to be a really big challenge, and just let's look to get out of the group. But we want to go all the way to the final in this tournament, and should we prevail tomorrow, which we're hopeful of in the game, then we know that we won't have to see those teams, France and USA, again till the final. So we looked at it that way and said, if we're really serious about just getting out of the group, then we would have maybe not been happy with it. But then if we're really serious about going a long way in the tournament, it's not a bad group to be in. But we know it's going to be a massive challenge tomorrow, and France are good. We've done our research on them, but we know if we can play our game, which we did for big phases of the game against USA, that we can definitely give them a good game, and if we play to anywhere near our potential, that we know we can beat anyone in the world on our day. So that's the challenge for us, is to achieve some personal best tomorrow and potential best in that game, and then hopefully that'll be enough for us.
You're entirely right. I don't think that's a coach's hyperbole. If you play to your potential, you can beat anyone in the world. And so what is it that you have to do to the team's mindset to persuade them that they can do that against France?
Yeah, I think they know. Everyone in the team knows that we can do it. We've had some great results. I mean, even the recent ones, we beat Brazil at the end of last year. We had a good draw against Australia, who world number 5, just drawn with Germany. We're 2-0 up. Unlucky not to beat Germany, who are a powerhouse of women's football. And so we know we can, and it's just around every player fully committing to bringing their best in the game. And when we do that, we know we're a pretty good force. If any players rest on their laurels or wait for France to bring the game to us, then we're going to be really fighting an uphill battle. So we have to take the game to them. And when we do that, like we have done against the Brazils and Frances and Japans in the past and USAs in the past, then we know we can match them. So it's just going to be 11 players at the same time, all fully taking on the challenge, and they've got full permission for us to just go for it, because we can't hold back in this game at all. And as soon as we do start holding back, that's when teams like France are going to be too good. So it's just going out there, and then the players knowing that they're going to be judged on their intent in this game, not so much how they execute everything, just their full intent to actually bring in the best selves, and that's all we can ask from them, really.
Football Ferns coach Tony Reddings. Auckland councillors have clashed over how and where they should invest the council's money. At a finance committee meeting today, they were told the council may have $770,000 invested indirectly in British American tobacco. This follows an investigation by RNZ News that found one of the council's 11 investment funds holds shares in the tobacco manufacturer. Anusha Bradley, who did that investigation, was at the meeting.
We want to reduce the harm from tobacco, we want to reduce the harm from alcohol, we want to reduce the harm from gambling. There's the basis of an ethical investment policy. We don't have to go any further than that as a start off.
And actually, I like her.
Tensions ran high upon hearing that the council had indirect investments worth more than $750,000 in British American tobacco. The council's chief financial officer, Sue Tyndall, said once the council has sold a chunk of its investments later this month, its total investment in British American tobacco should only account for 0.2% of its portfolio. Councillor Chris Darby has asked the council to find out whether any of its funds hold shares in tobacco, weapons, whale meat, gambling and pornography. The council treasurer, John Bishop, said it was trying to find out, but he was satisfied all its investments complied with the council's responsible investment policy and that they were all legal.
What is clear is we do comply with our responsible investment policy. And in reality, when it comes down to people's view on what investment is ethical and moral, everyone's got a different view.
But Councillor Chris Darby disagreed.
I am very concerned that the policy that we have in place at the moment, which we are complying with, has allowed an investment in this particular tobacco company to slip through.
Councillor Kathy Casey said Auckland needed to follow in Dunedin's footsteps.
And I'm horrified that we don't have the information. And just look south to Dunedin City Council. They this year offloaded all their unethical shareholdings. So we don't have to go far to find out what an ethical investment policy looks like.
Councillor Wayne Walker said excluding certain companies from its investments should be a high priority.
Councils like ours are some of the few institutions that people look to for the highest ethical standards. I'll repeat that, the highest ethical standards.
Sounds like John Campbell.
Because the money that we're talking about is not our money, it's public money.
Councillor Linda Cooper disagreed.
It's actually down to an interpretation whether you think something's unethical or not. Cigarettes, gambling, chocolate are not illegal. They're not illegal. And there's a lot of measures. I'm trying to cut down my chocolate. There's lots of stop smoking campaigns.
Treasurer John Bishop said it would be too costly to exclude certain types of companies.
In reality, when it comes down to people's view on what investment is ethical and moral, everyone's got a different view, and we could spend hours and hours debating what is ethical and moral, but everyone's going to have a different view.
Chris Darby said there are thousands of ethical funds the council could invest in, and he called for its responsible investment policy to be reviewed. Councillors agreed that should be tackled by the new council after the local body elections. For Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Firefighters say a new fleet of fire trucks worth millions of dollars are riddled with faults and their bosses should ditch them. The fire service admits there are problems and they're working to get the fleet of 27 faulty fire trucks, which cost them more than $13.5 million, fixed. Our emergency services reporter Adriana Weber has the details.
Riddled with faults, unreliable and falling to bits. That's how one firefighter described the new fire truck crews have had to deal with in Christchurch. Mike Gillen, who's been a firefighter for over 3 decades, says the trucks have been built poorly, with everything from pumps not working to handles coming off hinges. He says firefighters have become so frustrated they avoid using the model if they can.
We want to be able to trust our new gear, and there was an example of
appliance, and it was off the run getting fixed and stuff like that, and they were in no hurry to actually get it back on the run, and they preferred using our older Scanias. So you wouldn't find that very often in any sort of job where you prefer to use the old stuff rather than this latest and greatest.
The Professional Firefighters Union says the trucks have been problematic from the get-go. A spokesman, Boyd Rains, says the fire service failed to test the trucks before buying them.
The people that run the fleet at National Office in Wellington, they obviously have made some systemic mistakes with this, right up to once the first one was built, we didn't have a prototype to test before the order was confirmed.
But the Deputy National Commander of the Fire Service, Paul McGill, says that's not the case.
Well, the vehicle underwent extensive testing before it was introduced, and it was introduced into one station for a few months. But despite all that extensive testing on the first vehicle that came out, the faults we have identified now didn't present themselves, and some of them took several months to present themselves.
He says the fire service is doing all it can to get the problems fixed, and the trucks up to a good standard.
Well, we do understand the firefighters' frustration. I mean, we share that with ourselves. We've invested a lot in these appliances, and we've bought the best we could on the market from very reputable companies, and we're frustrated too at the series of problems we've found, and we're working very strongly with those suppliers to get them addressed. It's all being done under warranty, and we're working through those as quickly as we can.
But Mike Gillen says they should pull the MAN model trucks completely and stick to the Scania model trucks they trust.
I would like to put a halt to actually building more MANs. I mean, I'm at a station where we're supposed to be getting a new MAN next, but they're holding back on them now because they're trying to fix some of these problems that have arisen. And we'd actually prefer them not to fix it at all and just keep the Scania.
The fire service says it's confident the nature of the faults won't put the firefighters or the public at risk, and that's why it hasn't taken them out of service immediately. It's working with suppliers to get the trucks fixed. For Checkpoint, Adriana Webber.
This week's polar blast has closed roads and knocked out power to hundreds of homes, but the huge dump of snow has delighted winter sports fans and ski field operators around the country, including at an unheralded club run field on Mount Taranaki. Who knew? Well, our reporter Robin Martin did, and he went there.
The Stratford Mountain Club has managed the Manganui ski area for the best part of 75 years. Club pioneers first dug out tracks to the southeastern slopes of Mount Taranaki in the 1920s before building the Manganui Lodge a decade later. Even today there's a half-hour trek into the ski area, and club spokesman Rob Needs says the do-it-yourself spirit is still very much in evidence.
Well, the ski field is a unique New Zealand scenario. It's a club field, so it's run by volunteers. For the most part, it's a committee, just like the scout group or this football club. And Taranaki has a long history of skiing and more recently riding. And today we've just got epic conditions.
The ski field has a small learners area, an intermediate run serviced by a T-bar, and its legendary top toe gives access to some of the steepest runs in the country. Rob Needs says hardy volunteers earn their right to ski on that part of the mountain.
The enthusiasts are heading up there to dig it out, and those are the guys that'll earn their turns. So they'll put in 2 or 3 hours worth of digging and de-icing, and then they'll get the first runs. On its day, the top toe is some of the most sublime skiing in the world. Natural half pipes and not big crowds.
At 1,600 metres, the top toe is as high as the base facilities on Mount Ruapehu, and with no snowmaking capability, Manganui is open on average only about 10 to 15 days a season. Waitra man Robert Dorflinger has skied at Manganui for about 60 years. He admits the lack of the white stuff can be a challenge, but he reckons the trek in has an upside.
That's our biggest issue, is will we get it or won't we get it? We're at such a low altitude, it's hit and miss. Yeah. And the access, well, warms the body up getting up here, and we have very few accidents. And I think that attributes to the walk we all have to do before we ski.
Also enjoying the skiing was Okato digger driver Sam, who had taken the day off work.
Yes, as soon as the snow's here, because it doesn't get it that often. So when it does, you just got to make the most of it and get up here and enjoy it. Can't complain at this, can you? It's been pretty good. Snow's great. No complaints.
Andy Maven and his partner Chrissy Benjamin had just returned to Taranaki from the 45-degree desert heat of Las Vegas. He says the field's operators deserve credit for getting it up and running at the drop of a hat.
You appreciate the work and you see it. I got the Facebook update this morning and that's where it sprung to mind. You see the operators up there, it was before 7. Yeah, it's pretty impressive what they do because you don't know the night before if it's going to be open or not.
Chrissy, meanwhile, appreciated the wide open spaces on her first run of the day.
Bloody beautiful, so good. Yeah, awesome. I don't have to watch out for running into anyone.
So tell me about your run.
Not very good. I need more confidence, but second one should be better.
Rob Needs says the Manganui ski area's operating style is perfect for climate change.
It's a very fickle beast, and that's why with global warming, a turnkey operation like ours is very apt for the climate system that we're in now. So more weather extremes mean big dumps of snow followed by hopefully fine weather, and a turnkey operation suits that.
Anyone hoping to ski or snowboard this week at Manganui shouldn't wait until the weekend when rain is forecast. In Taranaki for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
And that little ski expedition to Taranaki ends our program for tonight. Thank you for being with us. We will be back tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government is considering boosting police numbers to keep up with the growing population. The police are not going to take action against the Chiefs rugby players who allegedly mistreated a stripper at a function last week. The lawyer representing Pike River families says MB shouldn't have let a $3 million reparation payment influence its decision not to proceed with charges. And a bitter row has developed between the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, and 50 US security experts who have questioned his ability to be president. Our next news and weather is at 7.
I'm not just the